Welcome to a new episode of Let's Get It Right with me, your host, Vernon Wright. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at The Right Leader. Hashtag, that's impact the right way. As well, welcome to the many voices of grit. Be sure to follow the two hashtags, the many voices of grit and the spirit of grit. You guys know that we try to bring some of the hottest and brightest names in the business in terms of education, and those that are innovative, and those, to be very honest, that just have their own style. And today is no exception. It is our honor, privilege, and absolute pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to have on the show today Dr. Frank Rudnesky. Some of you just may know him as some of his kids do, staff members at his school do, simply as Dr. R. Now, I want to go ahead and say this before I ask for him to go ahead and share a little bit about his story with us in this episode. You will notice that the name of this episode on your screen shows as Gold Shoes, Gold Moments. And there's a reason for that. If you're wondering, why is it Gold Shoes and Gold Moments? Stick with us. You're in for a treat. So obviously, Dr. Rudnesky, you are known literally worldwide, people across the world and across the globe. Talk to us a little bit, brother, about who you are. Share a little bit with the people about yourself.
First of all, my brother in education, Vernon, what's happening? It's a pleasure to be here with you. Texas to Southern New Jersey. I'm down in my basement in the Legacy Lounge, and I am fired up to be on your show. So it's a privilege and honor. I'm humbled. Thank you so much for having me today. But a little bit about me, I don't know if there's just a little bit about me, see, because I'm an old guy. I'm an old guy with braces, see? I don't know if you can see them, but you got to always be able to step outside of your comfort zone. I mean, the gold shoes, that's a story for a little bit later, but let's start off with a little bit about my grit. Now, when you're growing up in the world, one of my first memories, when I was 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, we lived in a project development, and I used to watch my dad walk across the courtyard and hitchhike to work 10 miles every single day. But that wasn't uncommon because other people's parents were doing the same thing. So one thing that I had early was a high level of work ethic. My dad used to always tell me, no matter what the job is, son, make sure you do it to the best of your ability. Whether it was cutting grass, I worked in a cemetery, I worked in a bank, I worked in a factory, I worked in a pizza parlor. But my first grade teacher told me, one day, by the grace of God, you'll know what your vocation is. We had no idea what she was talking about. We were only 6. But that moment stayed with me my entire life. And the first time I walked into the classroom as a certified teacher, I knew what she was talking about. Your vocation is your calling. It's what you're supposed to do. It's your passion. It's where you'll have the biggest impact on yourself and the people around you. It's where you're going to be able to create more leaders, and your leadership ability increases exponentially. Now, I didn't know what all that meant, but it developed over time through a compilation of research, stories, common sense, and meeting people like you along the way, Vernon. Where do you want me to start?
Well, Dr. Rudnesky, like, that is fabulous, right? So I want to take us back to something you just mentioned, and it's critical, and I think it's essential for us to know. So we just want to go ahead and take a step back in time before we also do that later. If you're wondering what that might be later, you got to stick around. You're in for a treat with that as well. But right now, I want us to take a step back to what you mentioned a few moments ago. You walked into the classroom. Here we are. You walk into the classroom. You're doing this thing that we call teaching. You're in education. How did you feel? What were the emotions? What did it all make sense? Did you say, you know what? I'm having my own personal epiphany right now. I think I've really found this. Like, take us back to that. Talk to us about that real quick.
Well, I always wanted to be the teacher that I wanted as a student. So that's where I was focused. How do I be that person that I wanted around me when I was that age? And my path to education was meandering at best. I went to the University of San Francisco by accident. I was working in a factory where I grew up in Southern New Jersey. My boss comes up to me and he said, if I take some classes at community college, he would pay for them. And that's how I ended up in college. I knew I wanted something better. My friends were falling off like flies, meaning they were getting into some bad things. So I knew that I had to get out of that place. So I applied to colleges in the Bay Area because I had a friend out there, and ended up at the University of San Francisco. Worked in a magic shop at Fisherman's Wharf. Actually ended up doing magic on the street to put myself through college.
A magician. You're going to tell me Dr. Frank Rudnesky has this whole time been hiding that he's a magician.
One of the funnest jobs I ever had, but it's almost like being a teacher too, and it came in handy a lot of times. I was even handcuffed, chained up, nailed in a box, and thrown in a river.
That sounds like Dr. Frank Rudnesky was Houdini. That's what that sounds like to me.
Vernon, they used to call me Rudini.
Ladies and gentlemen, did you catch that? There was Houdini. And now in the world of the PLN, the Edusphere, and Twitter, there is Rudini.
Yes, sir.
We appreciate you on that one, brother. There was Houdini, but now there's Rudini, straight from New Jersey, ladies and gentlemen.
So let's fast forward. I graduate with a business degree from the University of San Francisco, moved back to southern New Jersey, and no money, took out a small business loan, and established a magic shop on a boardwalk in southern New Jersey. So during the winter, if you've ever been to New Jersey, it's pretty cold. The boardwalk where I was closed down. They shut off the water October 1st. Started substitute teaching. So that's where I found my passion. A principal comes up to me one day, walks up. He was like a cartoon character. His name was Stanley Kleiss. He said, "You should be a teacher. You have a way of connecting with the kids." And then he walks away. I'm like, whoa, Mr. Kleiss, well, what do you mean? What are you talking about? And I looked into it, got certified, did my student teaching, and got into that classroom for the first time. And the rest is, I want to say it's history, but at the time, there wasn't a lot of research on climate and culture, which is one of my big things, climate and culture through leadership, offering opportunities for everyone, and technology influence, which is another sidetrack of something that I was extremely passionate about. So that's where I took off. Met my wife. I was coaching basketball. She was a cheerleading coach, and she's the one that suggested I go into administration, and went back to the high school that I attended. It was one of the things I wanted to do before I got into administration, became an administrator, and found my soul, my passion, my calling at the middle school level as a middle school principal. And
so
that's where.
Go ahead. What were you going to say, Doctor?
That's where the gold shoes came, but go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask you a question. So for our viewers, I mean, this is a fascinating story. And I know our viewers will absolutely feel the same way as I do going through this interview with you. So want to go ahead and just take a minute to kind of go ahead and look at where we've been so far in this interview. We have roughly about 7 minutes left, about 5 to 7 minutes left. You went through a variety of experiences. You went through a variety of things. I mean, you really had to hustle from vocation to vocation, from job to job. Someone that maybe is wondering if they have grit, this thing that we call grit, or if they have this ability to make it from point A to point B to really live out their dreams. What would you say to them if they came to you and said, Dr. Rudnesky, I have lived out the things in my life. I have looked at maybe some of the things I've been through, and they ask you, or were to ask you, have I even lived out grit? What would you say to them about their experiences using yours as a point of reference about grit?
Well, I think grit is associated with passion in my world, in my mind. And if a teacher came up to me that was working in my building, we were always proactive in that approach. But there's a quote that I use a lot, and here it is. Be who you want to be. Because in the end, you are who you want to be. And if not, you are who someone else wants you to be. And you may not like that. A lot of times there's a big difference between a vocation and a career. I mean, we all have work jobs that we wanted to or not wanted to make money because let's face it, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you need food, you need shelter, you need a way to make a living. But when you find that passion, when you find that grit, that perseverance, that you do what it takes, whatever it takes, you know, that's a third level of commitment. Are you a Star Wars fan?
I am indeed.
Okay. Well, I was just reading.
I think it might be referencing Yoda. There it is. There's Yoda right there.
This Jedi training manual, but yeah. Try, do my best, whatever it takes. That whatever it takes component is that Yoda stuff. Okay, that's the Jedi Knight stuff. That's do or do not. There is no try. So if you have that passion, and if you have that means and ability or not, the grit comes in because you find a way. You find a way to get where you not only need to be, but where you want to be. And that's the grit. Okay, that's the grit. You have people that have different levels of success, but I always measure success in the eyes of my students is you have an IQ here and an IQ here. Now, who's working the hardest? At some point, that IQ doesn't matter, but that person that has worked to their potential is the one that is the grittiest.
And that's really what we talk about in the profession is growth mindset. Carol Dweck,
yes.
And a lot of the work that she has done and many other people have pioneered a lot of work in that field as well that you are naturally inclined with are good, right? We recognize those, we acknowledge those. But it is really, as I have said as well on some of my videos and with other guests, it's taking action that makes the difference. So here's what I want to go ahead and ask you with about 2 minutes left in the show. And I wish that we had more. I will say this, ladies and gentlemen, if the response is good and a lot of you watch this episode and we got a lot of good vibes from this, there is a possibility that we might come back and do a part 2 with Dr. Rudnesky. But with about 2 minutes left, Dr. Rudnesky, if you had the ability to jump in a time capsule and go back in the past and to give your younger self a letter from the future, what would you put in terms of guidance, wisdom, and advice in that letter that you would go back in time and give to your younger self?
Be passionate about it or don't do it. Now I'm going to talk really quickly because this is what I would do. This book right here, 50 Great Things Leaders Do, Let's Get Fired Up. In 2006, I was at a conference with 12 colleagues and we got a grant to be able to go to this conference. And part of our breakout session in a room, we had about 200 people, was each person was telling their story. We had teachers there that had literally been teaching for 2 years. Teachers had been in the profession for 30 years. And it all came down to grit. It all came down to passion. It all came down to being where you want to be, creating that place where you want to be. And others will want to be there too. And it was a before and after climate and culture through leadership. How do you create that place? And as each person told the story, I had to write it all down. And on the plane ride back from Minneapolis to Philadelphia, that's what I started doing. We all have stories. We are all storytellers. But one of the barriers is that we don't tell our stories. So if we can get 10-year-olds to start telling their stories, and 17-year-olds and 20-year-olds and first-year teachers and 30-year teachers, that's where we can eliminate those barriers, where strengths and weaknesses eliminate each other. If we were on a team, you and I, Vernon, your strengths and weaknesses would eliminate my weaknesses, and so forth and so on, so that we would create this cohesion, this passion, this grit where we'll get it done. And we may fail, but we're also going to have many more success stories as well, because that's what we're supposed to do. This is where we're supposed to be, and we will make a difference because we choose to.
Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. There it is. an absolutely phenomenal interview with the one and only Dr. Frank Rudnesky. Of course, you see the title, Gold Shoes, Gold Moments. He's known as the principal with the gold shoes, and if you have been a follower of Dr. Rudnesky for a while on Twitter, you know what that means about the gold shoes. But you see that in this episode, Dr. Rudnesky has given us so many nuggets of just pure wisdom and insight and reflection that not only is he known as the man with the gold shoes, I think by the end of this episode, we have seen that he is the man that helps to give us gold moments as well. So it has always been our pleasure, as it has been with every other episode, ladies and gentlemen, to go ahead and have you here on our show, The Many Faces of Grit. Many voices, many faces, all grit. Be sure to follow the two hashtags, The Many Voices of Grit and The Spirit of Grit. Until next time, remember, feed your brain, feed your soul, and absolutely grow your role. That's impact the right way. See you next time. That's impact the right way.